Our gospel passage today comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 13, starting at the beginning. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the whole crowd stood on the beach, and he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up, and other seeds fell on the rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. And other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. And other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen." And then the disciples came and asked him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. From those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. The reason I speak to them in parables is that seeing they do not perceive, and hearing they do not listen, nor do they understand. With them indeed is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah that says, 'You will indeed listen, but never understand, and you will indeed look and never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes, so that they might not look with their eyes and listen with their ears and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them.' But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, to hear what you hear, but did not hear it." So hear again the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil comes and snatches away what was sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, and yet such person has no root and endures only for a while. When trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person falls away. For what is sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, in another 30. This is the word of the Lord. An interesting story, and it seems right around these times we have all become gardeners during our time of quarantine, so maybe we can relate to this story a little better than we did before. And this summer we're going to look at some of the parables that Jesus liked to teach, and I'm pretty sure they were as confusing then as they are now. Even the disciples right then asked, "Why do you speak to people in parables?" His answer was, "To you has been given to understand the kingdom of heaven, but to them it's not given. And to those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away." I feel like I have to mention this right now. This is one of those passages, one of those verses that is often taken out of context and misused. We might even remember the old Billie Holiday song that goes, "God bless the child that's got its own." The lyric saying, "Them that's got shall have, and them that's not shall lose." So the Bible says, and it still is news. The strong get smart while the weak ones fade. Empty pockets don't even make the grade. Sometimes this is used to condone this disparity of poverty and wealth in the world, as if that was what was supposed to be. But this was never about money. It was never about prosperity. Jesus is talking about the heart and the will, about having an openness to take in the truth of God's loving character at the center of the universe, and then participating in how that is played out in the world. He says, the reason I speak in parables is that they see but they don't perceive, and they hear but they don't listen, and they don't understand. And we tend to hear this as condemnation, which happens a lot when we're reading scripture. This isn't condemnation, this is exasperation. This is a sigh that says, how do you get people to open up to something new when their minds are made up? Why do Zen masters use cones? If you don't get it right away, then you have to think about it. When we think we already know the meaning of something, well, we don't even bother to think, and we don't learn anything new. So the parables are stories that ask us to think differently, to allow our hearts and minds to be open to new meanings. We may have heard it before. There's something new to be learned. And at this point, Jesus is frustrated with the crowds who still want him to lead a revolt against the Romans, and the religious leaders who want to control everything that he says, so he tells another parable. He tells them it's like this farmer who goes out to grow wheat, and he tosses the seed all over the ground, and some falls on a path, and the birds eat it up. And some falls on rocky ground. There's not enough soil. They have no depth. And some fall into weeds and thorns and get choked before they can blossom. But some falls on good ground. Trying to think about this, the closest thing that I can come to is trying to grow grass in the yard. I've never been a farmer or grown wheat, but when you scatter the grass on Georgia red clay, pretty much all of these things happen. Like the birds, they come and they eat some of the seed, and the ground is so hard that you can't get in, and the depth of the soil is shallow, and a hot summer Georgia day burns it away, and a little bit of it maybe gets through. I'm not sure that this is exactly what Jesus was looking for. I'm just happy when weeds in the ground look green enough to pass with the neighbors. But there's something new and something different happening here. When we look at this interpretation of the parable, we notice something interesting, because Jesus is talking about the seed as the word of truth being sown, and then he talks about the seed as being the person, the one who hears. It's like the seed is the germinated disciple, something that has begun to grow. And the truth is, we need soil and water to grow a plant, to let a seed blossom. We need the soil and the water of our life experiences to grow into who we were meant to be. So maybe the soil is the situation, the cultural mulch in which you are living. You are the dry seed. You're waiting to be germinated by the experiences of God's love that's found in the people and the relationships and the experiences that you have. Jesus tries to explain it this way. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, evil snatches away what was sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. Maybe this could be the person for whom life has been so harsh and so cruel, who has experienced so much trauma that they can't even really experience love. Having learned from experience to close themselves off and to hide their hearts, there's no way for the soil to get in. Then the rocky ground. The one who hears this word of love and realizes it's possible and immediately receives it with joy. But the person has no roots. When trouble arises, it falls away. Maybe this is the person who hears words of hope and they want their life to change, but they have no community support. Without a family of faith, without a spiritual support group holding one another up in the midst of struggles, it's easy to be discouraged, to be swayed, to return to despair and give up. And then there's the weeds and the thorns and the one who hears the truth about love, but the cares of the world choke out that word and it can't grow. We are born with a need for relationship. We are born with an openness to love. And in life, the people and the experiences teach us. They teach us how to connect with one another, or they teach us that we need to fear and protect ourselves. We learn that there is enough to share, or we learn that there's never enough, and the only way to get more is for us to keep it and to threaten others and to limit who we let in. It could be that the thorns and the weeds may have been for some growing up in a culture and maybe even a church that was filled with fear and condemnation. Growing up with people saying one thing but watching them do something else and getting to the point that there's no way to trust or care in this situation, in this world. In so many places, it's easy to lose hope in the power of love to meet our deepest needs and to give our lives meaning. But in life, as in this parable, some of the seeds reach good soil and they bring forth grain, some 100-fold. The seed that encounters nurturing, caring relationships can grow and great things can happen. Some of you germinated seeds sprout and grow and change the world. The germinated seeds that grow in good soil and flourish and feed the world. Now, it's interesting that at first Jesus seems to be referring to himself as the sower. It could be that God is initially the sower. God is the source of Jesus' life and teaching. Either way, I think something the farmers would have noticed is that this is a sloppy and extravagant farmer. Why would he let all this precious seed just fall on paths and on rocky ground and thorny places? Because there's always hope. This is why this is such an important story. It was for the early church. We become the sowers and the soil. Sometimes it feels like nothing good comes out of all our efforts. Sometimes we feel like we're wasting our time. But if we model our efforts after this sower, after this farmer, we will share our lives. We will share this message that love is at the heart of the universe. We will share it extravagantly and indiscriminately. We will take action and not judge which people or places might be worthy of our efforts. You never know when a seed might be ready to germinate in rich soil and grow. An example that I have loved reading in a book, Gregory Boyle runs a cooperative business that works with gangs in some of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Los Angeles. It's called Homeboy Industry, and he's written about it in a couple of books. And he shares the story of one young man. He has so many stories of lives that have changed, but one young man he met when he was 15, and a probation officer assigned him to the church for community service. And he saw him again a few years later walking out of a funeral that Gregory was leading. And then a few years later, he encountered him again in a fight on the street. As Gregory tried to break it up, the young man pulled out a gun and threatened to shoot him. So 20 years after they had first met, he was nervous about this man showing up in his office. And he describes their encounter and how the man said, I have now spent the last 20 years building a reputation for myself, but now I regret that I have one. And he even started to cry and rock and soothe that release of the ache in his heart. And he said, I don't know what to do now. I know how to sell drugs. I don't even know how to change the oil in my car. And Gregory writes that I hire him that day. He begins working with us the next morning. He describes this long-awaited germination of this seed. saying this young man discovered God's voice was now one not of restriction, not to shape up or ship out, but he found himself right in the expansive heart of God, the sacred place towards which God had nudged him all his life, into God's unwieldy love, love which cannot be contained, love which wants to accept all that we are. And in first reading this, it's like a parable. I was focused on the change that was taking place in the young man and how he was ready to grow. But notice here that Homeboy Industries is actually the rich, nourishing soil that is needed. Gregory Boyles and his friends and his co-workers and his supporters have created a safe place for wounded people to learn how to love, maybe for the first time, to learn how to accept love and love themselves, to overcome their fear and their hatred, a support group in which they can let go of their desire for revenge. The traumas of our lives hurt us. They don't make us hopeless. The fear and the anger and the walls that we have built up, they can crack. They can be dismantled so that new loving relationships can become possible. Sometimes the pain and the fear in the world seems to be choking out all of the good. But don't believe it, and don't be discouraged. Just keep on tossing out that seed of hope like the extravagant, sloppy sower who started the whole thing. And let your life be rich and nurturing soil where friends and family and strangers and enemies can grow and flourish 100-fold. And now let's sing.